Hi, everybody. I'm John Romano with Romano Law Group, and I will be your host today of this special session, a really fun and exciting session that we're going to have of our Connectionology Seminars of America podcast. And today we have a very special guest with a special firm doing special things, and that is we're bringing to you somebody on top of the world when it comes to funding in the plaintiff's world. And this is somebody not only special to us at Connectionology, but someone special in the funding world throughout our country. And that is Kyle Kinberger with HMR. Before I introduce Kyle, though, and have some fun with that, I want to tell you briefly about HMR, and then I'm going to go into some detail about this a little later when we talk to Kyle. The best way for me to describe HMR, and Kyle, I'm going to let you be describing it in a little bit, but HMR helps personal injury lawyers, as well as those injured primarily with catastrophic injuries, to pay for quality medical costs. And here at Romano Law Group, we have gone to HMR on a number of occasions where we had someone with a catastrophic injury. They needed to get quality medical care and treatment, such as in an inpatient facility for brain injury. And it was necessary to find that funding. And we did that with HMR. In addition to funding for medical bills, medical expenses, and treatment, they also provide pre-settlement funding for certain client needs, including not just the medical expenses on that end, but also living needs and to keep things going while the case is ongoing. HMR is an industry leader in this world of funding, pre-settlement funding, and medical bill funding. And they work within what I would call this area of non-recourse funding, which is so important. And I'm going to let Kyle talk to you in a little bit about that so that everyone clearly understands what non-recourse funding is, what it is all about. I want to just tell you that part of what is so special about HMR is not only the quality of their competence in this field, their skill, but their responsiveness in dealing with lawyers and clients. So I'll ask Kyle in a little bit to talk more about HMR. And although I've known Kyle a long time now and very proud to know him, I want to tell you a little bit about it. Kyle Kinberger is the National Sales Manager for HMR and manages sales operations around the United States for the entire organization. He currently oversees the daily operations of business done in the 39 states where HMR currently operates. Kyle has been with HMR since 2012, meaning since he was a boy. No, he's been with them since 2012. And Kyle has been in the medical funding space for over 15 years. HMR has had the opportunity to fund several thousand cases with a primary concentration on funding of TBI and catastrophic injury cases for plaintiffs who are uninsured. So Kyle, first, a great welcome to you. I thank you for being here on this very special podcast.
John, thank you so much for having us. It's great, but also sometimes a rare opportunity to get a chance to have a conversation like this. That's casual in nature and also can be very informative. So I really appreciate the opportunity to sit here and chat with you for a little bit.
Well, let me start with this. Think about a case that HMR did that is very special to you, whereas you look back on it, you say, I am really proud of how we handled that case, right from intake through to the funding and to the ultimate result or outcome of the case. A case that makes you especially proud, a case that you kind of wrap your arms around yourself. You have such a case like that that you can tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was first getting started, this was probably around 2013. I'm based in Louisiana, but I had just kind of expanded over into the state of Mississippi at the time. And I got a call about a case where a woman was driving down a highway and she had her 3-year-old son at the time in her back seat. And they were stopped at an intersection and they were proceeding through the intersection, and a logging truck blew the stop sign and hit these people broadside. And when I was taking the details of the case, it struck me because one of the things that happened was a little boy who was in the back seat actually ended up breaking his neck. They had, I think they had Medicaid at the time. So, she had some severe injuries, but because of the nature of his injuries, they actually had to fuse this little boy's neck at 3 years old. And I think anybody who knows anything about medicine, I mean, you fuse somebody's neck like that, you lose a substantial amount of mobility. And I can remember the lawyer at the time saying, the mother, she had nobody that could see her because of the complexity of the injury to her ankle at the time. Her Achilles was torn, amongst a lot of other things, and nobody would see her. So we got the case, we got involved, and I can remember there was a specialist who was over in New Orleans who we presented the records to, and he said, look, I think I can help this woman. And so we let the law firm know, hey, here's the options. This is one of the best surgeons, down here on the Gulf Coast. And I remember the lawyer telling me she doesn't have a car. She's got no way to get there. And I can remember I was just starting out trying to make a name. It was a great law firm. So I actually drove over to Gulfport, Mississippi. I picked up this mom and the little boy who was now 4 years old at the time. And I drove them over to New Orleans. And I can remember when she came out of the consult with the surgeon and she was crying her eyes out. And she said, somebody can help me. And it was just one of those overwhelming, like feel good moments because you felt like you were making a difference. And I was just getting started, and it was us going above and beyond and trying to really be a resource for people who just can't get what they need. And obviously I'll never forget that little boy who was sitting, in the back seat, when he moved, his neck was, he had to look at you like this.
Oh yeah.
And I had a daughter at the time who was 2 years old. And I mean, it just really like tugged at my heartstrings, but it was a fantastic outcome for that woman. She was able to, get her mobility back, and they had a great outcome as far as the case was concerned. But, right then I was going, this is what it's all about. It's more than just funding. It's about these people and about what we can do for them. So, I mean, I was kind of hooked at that moment.
That is a remarkable and beautiful story. Out of curiosity, in a case like that, did the lawyer, when he or she started working with you, come to you fairly early on in the case? In other words, what stage of the case was that
Sure.
in when they came to you? And I want to follow up on that in a minute, but if you can tell us that first, then I'll tell you where I'm going with my question.
Yeah, no problem. So actually, I think we probably got the call from the lawyer about 6 months into the case because, like I said, the woman had Medicaid. The problem is that the Medicaid doctors that she was trying to get into, they either couldn't see her, wouldn't see her, or the complexity of the injury was so substantial that they said, look, this is kind of, above my pay grade. And so we got it probably about 7 months in, and the lawyer ended up saying, look, we've been down, 3 or 4 different doctors, is there anybody, that can help? And that's really where we kind of entered the picture.
Okay, well, that's good, because it sounds like that lawyer made the right efforts, took the right steps to try to get things done. And then when that didn't happen, came over to HMR. So my question to you is this: let's just assume for a moment that you have your wish come true as to when a lawyer contacts HMR in the handling of the case. When would you like that to occur so that it makes it easier and more streamlined to obtain the funding and to get the bills paid and get the patient into the care and treatment necessary?
Sure. So, if I had it my way, I would probably say, a couple of months into a case. And I say that for a couple of reasons. And one is, I tell most firms around the country, if your client can get in and they can get a certain amount of treatment done, whether it's a letter of protection or whatever the case may be, and it's an easy process for that patient, that client, then you should do that. But that timing also gives the case a little bit more time to develop. Early on, obviously, some of the things, because we're non-recourse, that we look at is, is there a crash report? Is there a deck sheet? Are there any property damage photos? And a lot of times early on in the case, depending on what state you're in, you just don't have those things. So a couple of months in, usually most firms have what we need to really kind of get seriously involved.
HMR has a great national presence. You're assisting lawyers and clients or patients all over the country. What are you presented with in the way of any special challenges in dealing with these issues and these cases?
Sure. Well, I'll give you an example. You're in Florida, okay? In Florida, if I take a case, the lawyer typically is going to have a copy of the deck sheet. They're going to know what the policy limits are, because the law, I believe, says that the defendants have to turn over what their policy limits are. In a lot of other states that we operate in around the country, you don't know what those policy limits are until you file the lawsuit. And so sometimes you kind of flying blind in some of these places. In a lot of instances, there's not a police report, or there were no witnesses to anything that happened. We take a lot of complex cases that usually will end up in litigation and span several years. And so we're typically cognizant of the statute of limitations or prescription in a particular state. That plays into, how we fund and when we fund. So being aware of the different statutes, the different provisions in each different states, it presents a challenge, but I think over the years we've gotten good at kind of knowing what's what from state to state. So,
well, that's good to know. Kyle, the term, quote, non-recourse funding,
sure,
quote, has been around a while, yet I still continue to run into lawyers who really don't understand it. Certainly, I've seen judges who don't understand it, claims people who don't understand it. So let's go to a basic fundamental point. First, define, quote, non-recourse funding, end quote.
Sure. So non-recourse funding would be the concept of, if there is no recovery in a particular case, then we, the funder, would not pursue repayment from the law firm or the client themselves. It is part of the risk that we take when we look at an opportunity, underwrite an opportunity. And as I've said many times before, we do our due diligence just like a law firm would do due diligence. Is there enough coverage? Is there enough? Is there causation? How's the liability? But we really try to focus on the fact that, this is a benefit. Non-recourse funding is a benefit to the law firm and the plaintiff themselves. I'll talk out of the other side of my mouth for just a second and, and tell you that, because of the nature of the cases we're involved in, because they're catastrophic in nature, most of them are litigated, just because it's such a large dollar amount in play and the injuries are so severe that defense attorneys are going to litigate these cases. And so sometimes, and this isn't something people want to talk about, but people try to use non-recourse, in quote, against you or against a law firm. And they say, well, judge, this is a non-recourse company. They're not going to have to pay back this, medical bill if they lose their case. And so, the way that we've always approached that is, we purchase receivables. And if there's going to be an award, the way that our contracts and paperwork is crafted is the plaintiff's responsible for the full amounts of the medical bills. And that setup has always helped when it came down to litigating files. But as a company, we have never pursued a plaintiff or a law firm should there be a defense verdict where it results in no compensation for the plaintiff at all. So you kind of walk a fine line when it comes to non-recourse these days.
Okay, and Kyle, that really helps so that people have a good and clear understanding of non-recourse funding. So HMR has competitors around the country. There are dozens, perhaps hundreds of companies providing this funding for medical bills, for medical expenses, especially catastrophic injury cases. What is it that is unique and special about HMR that in your mind sets HMR apart from your competitors?
Well, you're right. These days, it seems like there are hundreds, sometimes if not several hundred competitors these days who either offer, medical funding or pre-settlement funding. But I think what I've found over the years, because it's always a question you get with a new law firm when you sit down and they say, well, this company was just in my office last week and you seem to operate in a similar fashion. So, why choose you over them, or what makes you different? And I think what I have found through the years is we have a different level of intimacy and responsiveness and access when it comes to how we approach not just cases we're involved with, but the law firms in which we are engaging. Somebody a long time told me, they said, man, you're doing a great job, executing on this. He said, but if I could give you one critique, I would tell you, you need to be more, intimate with your law firms. And that didn't quite register with me early on. And then as the years went by, what I came to understand is, intimacy is, a comprehensive approach to what a law firm needs or a client needs in a particular situation. It's being a resource for maybe things that you don't even provide. And a good example that I give to people is, I'll fund a traumatic brain injury case and, we'll get all of the treatment somebody needs from, neurologist all the way to, inpatient treatment. But then inevitably somebody says, hey, I really need an accident reconstructionist here, or I need a really great life care planner. That's not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but because we have so many touch points and contacts around the country, I find myself several times a week, as does my team, calling up, somebody who's a life care planner or an accident reconstructionist and going, hey, can you give this attorney a call? They're really, looking for this. And if you could help them out, I'd appreciate it. And kind of connecting the dots in that fashion, even on things that you don't necessarily benefit from, I find adds tremendous value. And we're doing that on just about every case that we seem to be involved in. So I heard a lawyer recently go, this company is not about funding. It's about access and it's about people. It's more than funding. And I thought that was, if I could have put it on a t-shirt right there, I would have. It was a fantastic representation of what we want to be when people think about HMR, because to your point, there's 100 different companies out there doing medical funding or pre-settlement funding that all operate, in the same, way. But I think for the comments I just made, I think that sets us apart. We're taking the hard, difficult cases that most people shy away from, either because they don't know where to go or they don't have the resources to actually fund it. And so I think that really is a stark contrast for us when we look at other companies around the country in the space.
Well, I can echo what you are saying, because our firm, Romano Law Group, we've worked with you all over the years. We will continue working with you over the years. And a big part of that, it's not just the product or the service, it's the responsiveness. And you all have you make a great effort to put forth a personal touch, not only with the attorneys, but with the client or the patient and with everybody in our firm. And I have found that when people are respectful and show such a dignified way of dealing with our law firm's receptionists, as you all do with our paralegals, our legal assistants, and our young lawyers and associates, that means the world to me. And that's what I have seen in all of our dealings over the years with HMR. So that's important. Kyle, a lot of companies or firms have a mission statement. Sometimes it's in writing, sometimes it's more in our minds. What do you view as the mission of HMR?
I think the mission statement is absolutely being able to assist the injured person in their time of need get the quality medical care that they deserve, so they can start to return to some sense of a normal life. It's cliche, but bad things happen to good people. And we find ourselves all the time presented with those types of cases where it's just horrific things that happen to great people. And so our mission continues to be, year over year, providing that outlet so people can get the quality medical care they need while their case is ongoing. And I think that should be the mission for anybody who's in this industry. It's unfortunate what happens to some of these people, but they deserve, to get the kind of medical care they need to get back on the road to recovery.
You at HMR, you have a number of products and services. Could you just tell us a little bit about those? Just list down for us some of the product lines and services you have.
Yeah. So, obviously at our core, our bread and butter is going to be medical funding. And the medical funding we are typically involved in, we all know it's for the uninsured or underinsured. But the types of cases that we fund, are primarily going to be, motor vehicle and trucking accidents, premise liability cases, which are difficult, but we definitely have our fair share in our portfolio of cases. We take a lot of products liability cases. We take a lot of denied workers' comp cases when comp's no longer willing to pay. We take a lot of Jones Act cases, maritime cases, and they all have unique components, but it all centers around medical funding for somebody who can't get the treatment they need. And that is obviously non-recourse funding product. As you said in the beginning, we also provide pre-settlement funding. It's kind of an interesting thing, because pre-settlement funding was never what we intended to start out doing. You say pre-settlement funding to a lot of, lawyers and law firms, they kind of look at you, with that side eye, because they think you're a loan shark. And so I become sometimes reticent to push that, even though it's a necessity, because I think there's a negative connotation that comes with pre-settlement funding when lawyers think about, what it is or what it could be. And so for us, pre-settlement funding is an add-on that is not necessarily where we make a lot of money or is our bread and butter, but it really runs hand in hand with a lot of these catastrophic injury cases.
Sure.
You have a family that can no longer provide for itself, and they can't go to the bank and get a loan. Depending on what state you are, the lawyers can't lend them any money. And so, it becomes a necessary product. And I think our rates are sub 3%, and it's non-recourse. And so, again, I'm not going to make a ton of money, but, it's definitely a service and a product that we can offer. I think the last thing that we are, kind of selectively doing right now is we will get involved in some of the mass tort opportunities that are out there. That could be a slippery slope, or it can be something great, but it's a long game when it comes to mass torts, and we try to be pretty selective about what we're involved in. Usually if we're going to get involved in anything that's mass tort related, it has to have some sort of medical component, like a striker hip or an attuned knee, something where medical is needed. And usually we look for those cases to at least be gritted if we're going to get involved in any kind of mass tort. But again, I find a lot of those type of attorneys handling mass tort tend to gravitate towards us because they're representing clients all over the United States, and they don't necessarily know where to go to get the medical care that they need. And so they come to us again as a resource going, hey, who do you have in, these 20 different states? So
one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that it seems as though there are a lot of brain injury cases, traumatic brain injury cases, which HMR is involved in funding. How did it evolve to where HMR seemed to move into doing so much in the world of TBI when it comes to medical bill funding?
Sure. Yeah, I think when we started out in 2012, the primary focus was definitely spinal cord injury cases. So we saw a lot of people who needed, back surgeries and neck surgeries and things of that nature. I don't want to say it's run of the mill, but that was obviously a lot of what we saw, because it's a typical part of the body that is injured when you think about a car crash or, a premise case. I think right around 2015, 2016, we started to see that there was kind of starting to build a national, spotlight and attention on traumatic brain injury that was 100% propelled by what was going on with the NFL and concussion within the NFL. It became this real polarized moment around the country where there was this heightened awareness about traumatic brain injury. And what we found is we started talking to attorneys, and they said, hey, I just audited my files, and I've got, a couple of people who I went and looked back and they lost consciousness at the scene, and they were out and they've been complaining of ongoing symptoms for now, 8 months that just haven't resolved. And it was the same statement over and over from the attorneys going, I just don't know where to go next. Whether it was a neurologist or a neuropsychologist or a facility. And so from that moment on, we felt like, man, this is a really underserved area of personal injury and cases involving people with traumatic brain injuries. And so we started talking to neurologists and centers and physical medicine doctors and neuropsychologists and everything in between on the treatment scope for traumatic brain injury. And then we started to see the response from the community, the legal community, of going, man, not only are you working with the right people, but you guys can fund a case where nobody's going to take a letter of protection. Most insurance policies don't have a provision for long-term care for somebody with a traumatic brain injury. And so, from about 2016 on, we never let off the gas. And so I think now we're probably one of the industry leaders in funding traumatic brain injury cases.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been amazing. And I feel as though you are recognized as exactly that in the field of TBI. So let's assume a lawyer has a case and there's been a significant injury and treatment is necessary, and there's no source available other than to seek out non-recourse funding. So the lawyer makes a decision and she calls HMR. What is it that you need that lawyer to do in order to get the ball rolling? And what can that lawyer expect as to HMR in terms of what HMR will be doing for the lawyer and the client?
Sure. So I think, most of the intake process has been centered around trying to be as timely as possible. Most lawyers I talk to, especially with catastrophic injury, they really need things done in a timely fashion, because there is usually a very anxious family behind the scenes who's worried about a family member who's injured. And so what we're typically requiring or asking of law firms upon taking a case in is, hey, is there a crash report or an incident report? Can you tell me what happened to this person? What's the insurance coverage look like? Defendant, and does the person have UM? What do the medical records indicate up to this point? Trying to identify, hey, has somebody lent themselves to causation in this case, linking this person's, injuries to the accident they had. And so, it's usually about 4 or 5 things that we're taking in on intake: police report, deck sheet, property damage photos, witness reports, and medical records. A lot of cases come to us that are already in litigation. And I tell most lawyers, I said, if you're able to, a copy of the petition or any kind of discovery responses. Discovery responses are gold, as far as I'm concerned. And so that kind of initial grab, from the law firm enables us to provide a pretty timely turnaround. I'm usually responding because our internal process and internal case managers are, processing the file. And then usually we're responding back within 24 hours to say, hey, this looks great. Here are the options for treatment in a particular area based on what the injuries are. Or, hey, do you have a little bit more information, because this isn't quite cut and dry. and I'm a little confused about something. But the responsiveness is usually there within the 24 to 48 hours. And so the law firm, once we've approved something, they've typically come to us because the patient has said, look, I need to see someone. And so again, we either try to provide options in a particular area of people, who work in that field, or, there are a lot of instances where the law firms and the patients themselves come and say, hey, I'm treating with Dr. Smith. Would you reach out to Dr. Smith and see if he's willing to work with you, because I don't have any insurance. And so we kind of do it in that way. And then really that's when our back office processes start to kick in, because our team behind the scenes, they do all the scheduling, they're coordinating appointments, they're getting estimates for what the medical treatment might cost, so we can present that to the law firms, so they can present those numbers to the clients and say, hey, this is what it looks like. So everything is transparent on the front end. We don't talk about it often, but that back office administrative process that we have is really the kind of the crown jewel of our process, because it saves so much time for the legal secretary or the paralegal who's typically doing those things. It really becomes a time-saving moment for a lot of law firms when they start to use us and utilize us for that kind of care.
No, I like that, and I'm very familiar with it in working with you all, and it makes all the difference in the world. So Kyle, as a lawyer, we get to read about, hear about, see all kinds of negative things said about lawyers, lawyer jokes, news stories that are problematic about lawyers and all of that. I know in your world, non-recourse funding, there are also misconceptions, things you have to deal with. What are some of those misconceptions you deal with, and how is it that you handle them and confront them?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges in this industry is you're kind of behind the 8 ball from the get-go before you actually step into a law firm, because most law firms look at funding just as a whole, as a predatory thing. That's just that's been my experience up to this point. You start saying the word funding and people immediately go to, well, you're going to charge my client, 90% interest a year, and it's going to be compounded, and you're going to take half the settlement, and it's going to turn the case upside down. I really don't want any part of this. And so really you have to level set in that first interaction. Hey, that's not the company we are, and that's not what we provide. And when you start to hear some of the normal concerns that a law firm might have, probably the most common one I have outside of, hey, you're a predatory lender, is, well, I know all about, factoring companies and companies that do non-recourse funding. If you're involved, the bills are going to be higher because, you're involved. And I will tell you, it is unequivocally false. Any medical providers that we have worked with, the first question out the gate that I ask them is, if I have a patient who has Blue Cross or Aetna or anything, what you're going to charge them is the same that they would be charged if they utilize my service. There's not going to be 2 different bills or higher bills or anything like that, because medical providers need to have the same charge master across the board. And so if the answer to that is ever no, which I haven't seen it, I would walk from that moment, because inevitably I'm going to have a problem with that on the litigation side of this. When somebody says, a savvy defense attorney goes, hey, this same surgery would have been 100,000 here, and now it's 200,000 because HMR is involved. We don't operate like that. It is a common misconception that, the bills are going to be higher. You know, I think a lot of people think that we bill, like we're a billing company on the cases we're involved in, that somehow the bills that the medical providers give to us, then we turn around and bill them ourselves. Again, it's just not the case. The bills that we provide the law firms are directly from the medical providers themselves. Those are their charges. We've simply purchased that bill and we're passing it on to the law firm.
Yeah, one of the things that I've enjoyed is I've seen you at a number of these conferences and meetings around the country, and I have watched you handle some of the more difficult questions coming from some lawyers, and you've always been direct in your response, and you say, no, sir, that is not how it happens. Here's how it happens, and you explain it. And that's terrific. That speaks highly of you. That speaks highly of HMR. And it's been good to see that. Kyle, there is a saying, if a lawyer ever tells you he or she has never lost a case, it's because that lawyer is not trying cases. And it's so true. If you try a lot of cases, there will be some losses. Mm-hmm. In your world, early on in our podcast today, you talked about the wonderful story, the case that of the little boy with the broken neck, and it turned out so wonderful. Mm-hmm. Give us an example, as uncomfortable as it may be. Give us an example of a case where perhaps things didn't go so well for the case, the lawyer, the client, and you had to deal with that near the conclusion of the case. Just walk us through what happened, how that happened, and what was the outcome.
Sure. Yeah. The one that comes to mind is we had a case with a family coming down a rural highway, and it was a family of three, and a car coming the other way lost control and hit them head on. They had to be extracted from the car. All of them, had significant traumatic brain injuries, along with other just orthopedic injuries as well. And the premise behind the case was that there was a defect in the steering wheel from the kid driving, and he lost control. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the term death wobble, and so it was a product liability case, and they were alleging that it was a defect in the steering wheel that caused, somebody to lose control, and ultimately, the manufacturer of the car is the responsible party. Again, this isn't your typical, rear ender, and it's indicative of the kind of cases that, hey, look, we're willing to take a chance. So we funded, several $100,000 worth of treatment for all of this, for this family. And this went to a jury trial. And it was in it was a relatively conservative venue, but not terribly. And the jury just could not wrap their head around the fact that there's this death wobble that, would have caused it. And furthermore, the brain injury part of it seemed to be very difficult for them to comprehend, because you're looking at, plaintiffs who, for all intents and purposes, they look okay. I mean, the car was crumpled, that it looked horrific, but they didn't have any cuts or broken bones or anything. You're saying, man, it's all in their head. And they just couldn't get past that. And it was a defense verdict. And they really didn't award much of anything. And so we lost a lot of money in that case. But like I said at the outset, that's part of the risk we take. And I'm it's unfortunate that it went that way, but we're in the business of dealing with trial lawyers, and they put on their case and they tried it, and it just didn't go their way that day. And so it's part of what happens.
Kyle, let's take, since we're talking about difficult situations, let's take a more difficult one. Let's say you have a case where HMR has funded the amount of $400,000, and the case is moving along, and for whatever reason, the case goes south.
Sure.
And the lawyer calls you up and says, we have a problem. The top dollar they will pay is, let's just say $600,000.
Sure.
Now, $600,000, we have your lien, we have other liens, we have other outstanding medical expenses from other sources. There are costs of litigation. There are all of these things, and we're trying to get some amount of money to the client. Tell us the steps you go through at HMR to first assess the situation, and then give us some example of how you might handle a given situation when that happens. In other words, where there's going to be some money, but not enough to go around to pay everybody fully and completely.
Sure. Well, I think we get into every case with the mindset that, if it's in litigation, the attorney's got a 40% fee. If it's not in litigation, it might be a third. That in most instances, trying to put a third in the client's pocket, and then a third is left for, the medical expenses that somebody incurs. So we kind of go through that a third type thing, unless it's in litigation, trying not to get over our skis. And we use that formula quite often when we look at underwriting a case. People often tell me, hey, there's $1 million in coverage. Well, just because there's $1 million in coverage doesn't mean you're getting $1 million for this case. And so the example I would give you is I actually had a case where we funded 12 months at an inpatient brain injury facility in Texas. And the bills were $600,000 for 12 months of inpatient care. Unfortunately, what came out in the mediation was the fact that the guy actually had a history of a prior fall that nobody had discovered, where he hit his head, had a hemorrhage, and it didn't necessarily take away from the fact that accident that we were funding was catastrophic, but it kind of diminished the value of that case. And I can remember the lawyer came to me and he said, look, I know I owe you X, but they're only offering, $2 million right now. I need you to take a $200,000 cut. And it's not a perfect scenario. But what we try to evaluate in an instance like that is, who are the lawyers? What is the potential that there is longevity in this relationship? Is the circumstances legitimate? And if all those things line up, in that case, I ended up giving the guy the reduction, and now he's probably somebody that I do, 10 or 12 cases with every month. And so some of it is about not being short-sighted in that moment and knowing that, hey, it's an unforeseen set of circumstances, and sometimes it's not that way. But we try to be pliable along the way, because the difficult part in it is you don't want to set a precedent that, hey, every time I fund this case for you, you can come and ask me for, a 50, 60, 70% reduction, because then I won't be in business anymore. It's kind of a fine line to walk.
it sounds like in that case, though, HMR made a wise business decision. HMR made a wise marketing decision.
Sure.
HMR really went out of its way to do right by the client and the lawyer. So that was a win, 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 win. One of the things that I have also seen in HMR, and I just want to thank you for this. I've noticed that HMR has been very supportive of organizations like AAJ, certain of the state trial lawyers associations, certainly Connectionology Seminars of America, and there are others. And I understand in many ways why a company like HMR does that, but I will just tell you, there are many, many companies that choose not to do that. So you are going as a company above and beyond the call of duty by doing that, because it helps the system of justice in so many ways, and it helps so many clients, so many lawyers, so many causes. And when you are there to sponsor and support events at any continuing education program or event, all that is doing is making everybody better to obtain higher quality results for these clients. So I can't thank you enough for HMR doing that. So Kyle, we are close to concluding what has been a really a fun and informative hour. What would you like to say? Take another couple of minutes. Anything you would like to say about HMR, about the future, about what you are doing? I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, John. I think, well, first of all, I can't tell you how much I appreciate opportunities like this, because to be able to articulate what it is you actually do and the services you actually provide and really where the value is, sometimes it's a rare moment. People are busy in the day and age we live in. You know, not everybody is as accessible as we would hope. But being able to come on and talk about the fact that, you know, we have a unique niche as a company, and that's, you know, the catastrophic injury cases. I know they're not on every corner, but when they're there and somebody really needs the assistance, we seem to be the company that people are turning to get that medical care funded, you know, whether it is the brain injury case that we've been talking about, or a spinal cord injury case where somebody needs a surgery. We've been doing a lot of amputation cases around the country. And the fact that we're continually getting the calls from repeat attorneys going, man, it was such a fantastic outcome the last time, or hey, you guys were really on the ball. The fact that probably 80% of our business is repeat customers and repeat firms that are coming back to us and saying, man, this was just a great experience. It really speaks volumes of the team that we have in the back office that really handles just a tremendous amount of the legwork for us. But I tell you, we're a company that's growing. We operate in 39 states, but I mean, we're trying to add, people year over year, trying to expand the footprint that we have. And I love being a part of a company that cares and wants to grow and wants to help and wants to be involved in things like Connectionology. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of law firms that we've been able to connect with through this platform and through your organization. And it's just been a godsend for our business, especially during COVID, being able to come on week after week and connect with people and tell them, what we do, or real life cases where we've been able to assist. We consider ourselves like you said, the industry leader in medical funding, and it's going to stay that way. We have no signs of letting the foot off the gas pedal at this point. So,
Well, I love to hear that, but congratulations to you and to HMR for your leadership roles in funding in
Yeah.
America, medical funding in America. This has been great. I have really enjoyed it. You are terrific and
great.
just fun to be around and always informative and educational. So thank you so much. And I will see you soon. And we are signing off.
You got it. Thank you, John.